Hello, this is our Chapter 13 lecture on blood, heart, and circulation. So to begin, I'd like to review the functions and components of the circulatory system. So the circulatory system's functions include transportation. The blood vessels carry around respiratory gases, nutrients, hormones, enzymes, and waste products. The circulatory system also has a regulatory role where hormones can be transported and also temperature can be regulated. And third, there's a function for protection which involves both blood clotting and immunity. So the major components of the cardiovascular circulatory system include the cardiovascular system, including the heart, a four-chamber pump, and blood vessels of arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules, and veins, and a lymphatic system, which includes lymphatic vessels, lymphatic tissues, and lymphatic organs, and these include the spleen, thymus, tonsils, and lymph nodes. Okay, so the next topic is composition of blood. So the average adult has 5 liters of blood in their bodies, and we have both arterial blood, which is blood leaving the heart, and we have venous blood, which is blood being returned to the heart. And in general, the arterial blood is going to be bright red because it's oxygenated, and venous blood is going to be dark red because it is deoxygenated. And the exceptions with this include the arterial blood that is going from the heart to the lungs, and also the venous blood that is going from the lungs to the heart. And the difference is the arteries going from the heart to the lung have actually deoxygenated blood, and then the veins going from the lungs to the heart actually have oxygenated blood. So there's a difference when we talk about the pulmonary arteries and veins are different than the other arteries and veins in the body. And blood is composed of, the volume of blood is about 55% plasma by volume and 45% formed elements, which are cells. So if blood is centrifuged, as shown in this diagram over here, we have the formed elements that go to the bottom and the blood plasma that goes to the top. On the very bottom of the test tube, we'll see red blood cells on the very bottom. Above that, there's a little white layer called the buffy coat. This contains both white blood cells and platelets in this little white layer above the red blood cells. And then above that is the liquid portion, which is blood plasma that is lacking the cells and platelets. And I just want to also note that blood plasma contains, which is up here, just water and dissolved solutes, such as the ions that we read about, like sodium, for example, and other chemicals. It can also contain molecules like glucose. And when we have our blood analyzed by the doctor, a clinical lab scientist will be looking at a blood smear to look at all the different formed elements that are visible in our blood under the microscope. So a clinical lab scientist will also look at some other enzymes found in blood. So creatine phosphokinase is measured commonly. Men tend to have higher levels of the creatine phosphokinase than women. You don't need to memorize the numbers. And of course, we know that is involved in phosphocreatine, which is going to be involved in ATP production in our skeletal muscles. lactate dehydrogenase is an enzyme that we know can form lactic acid from pyruvate, right? That's also can be found in blood. We also have phosphatase in our blood, which can be evolved in protein, breaking down proteins. Hemoglobin is, of course, really important for carrying oxygen in our red blood cells, and males tend to have a little bit higher levels on average than females. The red blood cell count is huge. It's about 4.5 to 6 million red blood cells per cubic millimeter of blood. And the number of white blood cells is much lower, about 4,500 to 11,000 millimeters per cubic millimeter. I just want to go back and just show you the image. So if you look at the image, we can see the white blood cell band is much thinner than the red blood cell band. And that reflects this huge difference of thousands of white blood cells per cubic millimeter compared to millions, right? So I think that's the thing I try to remember it, millions of red blood cells per cubic millimeter, and I think thousands of white blood cells per cubic millimeter of blood. For hemocrit, this is the volume that red blood cells take out of the total volume of blood. And in females, we expect the red blood cells to represent about 36 to 40% of the 46% of the volume of blood. In males, it's a little bit higher. We see about 41 to 53% of the volume of blood should be red blood cells. I just want to jump back to that picture and show you again that this is, a little bit less than half of the total volume of blood, and that is the hemocrit value. Some other things that doctors often measure in blood include hormones, as shown on top. Here's insulin, which you know is important for diabetes. And then we have a bunch of ions, bicarbonate, calcium, chloride, potassium. I just want to show you that there's really a very discrete range, a normal range of these molecules found in blood. And then, for example, like for hormones, males have way more than females. Females have very little testosterone compared to males. And cholesterol should be under 200 mg. And we have glucose, lactic acid, protein, triglycerides, urea, nitrogen, uric acid. These are all things that doctors and nurses will measure to make sure you're healthy and that you have all these and by the way, the glucose is after fasting that we measure glucose levels. But basically, in a healthy status, that you need to have your numbers fall within the expected range. If not, then that indicates there's some kind of underlying physiological problem that needs to be addressed. So plasma proteins make up about 7 to 8% of the volume of plasma. These include albumin. Albumin plays a key role in creating osmotic pressure to help draw water from tissues into capillaries. And this is really important for maintaining the proper blood volume and blood pressure. We'll be talking more about this in the future. Other important plasma proteins include the alpha and beta globulins. These are involved in transport lipids and fat-soluble vitamins. And then we have the gamma globulins that are actually antibodies that play a role in immunity. And then we have fibrinogen monomers, that these can be polymerized to form a fibrin clot. And serum is a term that you'll hear mentioned in the hospital, and serum is blood without fibrinogen. So I mentioned before that the formed elements in blood represent cells, and red blood cells are called erythrocytes, right? And we know that those carry, these are biconcave cells, and they carry oxygen and carbon dioxide throughout the body. It carries oxygen from the lungs to the tissues, and then the tissues, it exchanges oxygen for carbon dioxide and brings the carbon dioxide back to the lungs for to be exhaled. We have leukocytes that are white blood cells playing an important role in the immune system. We have granulocytes, and these play a role in immunity as well. There are phagocytic neutrophils. There are eosinophils that help to detoxify foreign substances, and basophils that produce the anticoagulant heparin. We have agranulocytes that include phagocytic monocytes, and then lymphocytes that really provide very specific immune responses, such as the creation of antibodies. We'll be talking more about that in the near future in a separate lecture. And then we have platelets that play a really important role in clotting of blood. Clotting of damage in blood vessels.